Welcome to FaithX. Today I'll be interviewing Lang, who started a new ministry called God and Games. And basically, you're just trying to help gamers to find God. Am I right?
Help gamers to find God. Yeah, maybe the other round too. Help the church find some gamers, I think.
Okay, right.
I think it goes both ways, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm very happy to have you on board.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you can share with us a bit more about like what is this ministry that you started and what's the vision behind it?
Right, so this ministry is quite broad. I mean, there's lots of things that I'm trying to do, but the general idea is for this ministry to be a bridge between the world of the church and the world of games, right? So yeah, because there just seems to be a bit of a divide. I mean, gaming is so mainstream right now, and it just feels like the church is, not really so connected to this whole gaming space. And sorry, what's the second part of your question?
And what's the vision behind
What's the vision?
ministry?
I mean, the vision would be, ultimately, I think the vision of it, I just want it to be a place in which Christians and non-Christian gamers can have conversations, open conversations about life, about games, about faith even, in a very non-threatening environment, because that's games. Games are, it's a very non-threatening environment, right? You go there, you play, people let their guard down. So yeah, there's lots of ways in which we're trying to do that. We've got like a Discord server, I'm coming up with some like YouTube content and all that, but we want to have events too and all that kind of stuff. And we just hope that all these things can be just spaces in which gamers can interact with each other, and Christian and non-Christians, and just have and of course that it'll be like a really positive environment. So it's, like gaming has a somewhat justified reputation. The gaming space and online environments has a somewhat justified reputation for being a bit toxic. So I think, I think there's this opportunity for the church to just show the world what it's like to have a very positive and encouraging gaming community.
Yeah, but what got you started, even in this endeavor?
Got me started?
Yeah.
Well, I think this is just me trying to bring two things that I love together. So I'm a lifelong gamer. One of my earliest gaming experiences was playing Nintendo with my mom when I was like
With your mom?
Yeah, with my mom when I was like 5 or 6 years old. Back then, you couldn't save games. So you had to, so we played this game called Wings, and we got so into it that it came time for my bedtime. So you have to turn off the TV, you have to leave the console on, and then she would put a sign around it, don't touch. Then I come back from school the next day, we continue. So anyways, that's just us playing. Yeah, so I've been a lifelong gamer. I used to be a competitive Street Fighter player as well. I used to travel overseas for tournaments and stuff. Used to organize tournaments. So that was my, that's just been my hobby for such a long time. And of course, recently I felt called to ministry. So I went to Singapore Bible College, did my Masters of Divinity there, worked in a church for a while doing youth and young adults ministry. And so I'm just trying to bring these two things together. I recently left ministry about full-time ministry about 2 years ago, partly due to my mom's cancer. Just needed to spend some time with her in her last days. And of course, COVID happened. So everything, 2020 just kind of passed everybody by. Everything was in a standstill, and, got time to think, got time to explore. And so, I just thought, hey, I believe there's a need. And I think I have experience in both the faith area, biblical area, and the gaming area. And so why not try and bring these two things together?
Your mom's quite a rare breed, isn't it? Like for your mom to be like into the gaming world, I think that's quite rare.
Yeah, my mom. So she passed away last year, but she's pretty cool. I mean, my mom's Filipina, so she was very open. So I mean, I'm very proud to say that I have a mom who played video games with me when I was 5 or 6 years old. So it was nice, very nice memory.
Oh, cool mom.
Yeah, very cool mom. Very.
You have siblings?
Yes, I have 2 younger siblings.
You play with them as well?
Of course lah, and of course I'm the oldest. So you get
just destroy them.
Typical. It's the typical trope lah. Like I get player 1, of course, and yeah, so one of my first memories was playing Sonic 2. I think then there was Sonic and Tails. So my brother I always get to play Sonic. My brother plays Tails. But guess what? I think they're better than me, right? I used to trash them all the time. But yeah, they are still lifelong gamers. And actually, when it comes to first-person shooters, I think they're both better than me. I'm still better in fighting games though, but they're still better than me, and they've gotten really good in first-person shooters. Yeah.
So they got back at you.
I think so. I think so.
What do you play now though?
I play all sorts of stuff, man. I think my roots are still fighting games, but I like to say that I dabble in everything: first-person shooters, strategy games, console games, action games. I play almost everything, but lately my jam has been a lot of Monster Hunter. Yeah, it's I've been playing that a lot, and playing a lot of Switch.
Oh,
I was saying I told someone else the other day that I think gaming sometimes nowadays can get a little bit, the term sweaty gets a bit serious, the gamer term, right? It's very sweaty, try hard. And Switch is just like a nice breath of fresh air because it's kind of just fun and
casual,
a bit casual and kiddie sometimes. Sometimes you just need a break from all the sweat. But yeah. But I play like almost everything, I like to say. I think the only genre I don't play is... No, I play everything, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think I like to say, yeah.
Right. And how maybe can I help people to understand like what's the draw of gaming that keeps people in it, like gets people in this world?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's positive and negative draws. So, I mean, let's start with the bad news, right? Let's start with the negatives. I mean,
we
the
all
negatives,
know that, right?
I mean, and we all know, yeah. I mean, I think at the core of it, one of the draws, which actually maybe it's not positive or negative, but it's this sense of validation that being good at a game can give you. So for all of us, we want some form of validation and recognition in our lives, and games are built in such a way that there are very clear goals that you have, and when you reach those goals, there's a very clear affirmation of what you've done. Level up, you beat the stage, you win. And so for many of us, in life where we don't really get that validation, games can be a source of that. So it can be a bad thing, but at the same time, I think the need for validation is a God-given need that we all have, and I think it's just about being aware that you don't look to games to be the main source of your validation. And games also are a place where you can be part of something bigger than yourself. So, onto a more positive note, I think that ties back into the gospel. We all are created to be part of a mission. We all are created to be part of, right? Like the gospel is about like saving the world, right? Redeeming the world and all that. And I think that's kind of like a inbuilt tendency that we have as people. And so, yeah, when you play games, you get to be part of something bigger than yourself. You get to be part of a bigger adventure. You get to save the world, the princess, or whatever. And I think that speaks to that, whatever that is that God has built inside of us. Yeah.
Well, so games basically, in a sense, satisfy the innate human needs, things of validation, purpose, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Yeah. Which, like I said, can be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that like churches are lagging behind in this space, and I mean I was chatting earlier with you, and we both agree, whenever there's a new form of technology, the tendency is that we tend to be averse to it.
Yeah.
When the internet was first out, don't get addicted to it. We always point out the flaws of it, and warn it, and that it's good to admonish each other, in the areas where we could fall for all the pitfalls, But there's also a lot of potential in the technologies that we don't really harness, right? Especially when it came to the internet, smartphones, even gaming, right? So maybe can help us to understand why is the church so averse to the potential of new things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. To answer that, let's go back in church history, right? And church history, for example, we're all considered Protestants. Yep. and one of the biggest issues with that led to the birth of the Protestant movement was the idea of the Bible being translated into a language in which the masses could read. And the Catholic Church was against that, because the Catholic Church was afraid that when you give the Bible into the hands of the average person who was not trained theologically, they could come up with all sorts of interpretations. And so even back then, there has always been, I think it traces back to this sense of, this sense of wanting to, this idea that people are not, that you need to kind of handhold people in terms of their engagement with media and knowledge and the truth. So I think there's some validity in the church's concern about like everybody interpreting the Bible as and how they wish.
I mean, to be fair, the Catholics were right about that, because we have so many false doctrines now as well.
Now we have false doctrines, we have so many different kinds of denominations and cults and all that. And it's someone who is theologically trained, I can see how theological training is really important and is very helpful in terms of understanding the Bible and interpreting the Bible. But at the same time, I mean, we're also blessed by having the Bible in our homes, right? And that we can read it for devotion and all that with a little bit of guidance, I'm sure. Sometimes we have, study Bibles, or sometimes our pastors teach us through sermons or how to read. And there is also that space for us to, I think, hear from the Holy Spirit and along with sound interpretation as to what God wants to say in our lives. So I think it's always been this. There's always been this tension, and it's in church history they like to call it like the theological pendulum or whatever.
Sorry, it's called what?
Kind of like the theological pendulum. So the church likes to swing from like either hyper conservatism to hyper liberalism, or hyper faith, hyper grace into hyper law, and there's always an action and a reaction. So yeah, I think I think the church went through a lot of so I used to pastor at a Bible Presbyterian church, and the Bible Presbyterian churches sprung out as a response to the liberal movement, liberal theology in the late 1800s, I think, early 1900s. And there is that danger, I guess. But I think what as human beings we tend to do is we tend to overreact, and we tend to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So yes, there are dangers in new media, and that new media back then was the printing press, right? So and the Bible. There is danger in new media like movies and TVs. Now we know how TVs and advertisements do kind of mess up the minds of young people. And some movies are just generally unwholesome, right? But I think the key is not to overreact. The key is to approach it with wisdom, with prayer, and of course, with like I said, with wisdom and with prayer, and to see how we can redeem that and how we can use it for God's glory, without throwing, like I said, the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. There's like this entire community right now, which is called the digital missions community, like in Singapore. I mean, we recently got plugged into it as well, whereby we're basically trying to redeem the digital space for God's kingdom, and to use it as a means of discipleship, evangelism, and all that, right? I think that's one way in which we try to see the potential, not just the pitfalls. Now, what can we possibly do with it? Like the printing press made like all the Christian books are like possible, or the Bible like available to the masses, right?
Yep.
And then the internet basically made the Bible available literally on our screen, right? And all sorts of Christian material. I get a lot of like theological material from websites nowadays, actually.
Yeah,
rather than books, And I think there is a lot more that we can do to redeem the spaces in which we have once rejected. So I think one area that we have not done so well in is actually the gaming space. and for good reason, right? I mean, there are quite a number of games which actually, in all honesty, gives me goosebumps. Yeah, so maybe you can share with us a bit more about like what's the way in which Christians, like youth leader or anyone, you know, interested in redeeming this space, how can we approach it?
Right. So I think the best way forward in general when approaching new media, approaching new cultures, you know, anything like any new kind of environment, is to be very clear about your first principles, right? So the first principles of the gospel, and we need to be very clear about what is essential and what is core to our faith and what are not core to our faith. So the problem always happens when we take things that are not core to the faith, like maybe certain ways in which we observe church or certain ways in which we pray or whatever, and make it a core thing. And so that's what the Pharisees were doing. They were all making all these peripheral things. They were saying that everything was, you know, if you don't do all these things, you were blaspheming God or whatever, right? But Jesus says what? The core of it is what? You know, like the Bible that we like to quote Micah, right? Seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before your God. And Jesus said, right, if you love your neighbors. And so I think that is really the core. So I think if the core of that, if our relationship with God, our love of God is strong, and our love of people is strong, I think that we have to believe that can cut through the digital space and make an impact there. I think that's it. So I think that's always the question that we ask ourselves. So that's the question I say in GG. So as I'm starting out GG, we have a Discord server, and I had to come up with rules. And if you go and read the rules in the Discord server, I mean, there are all these rules, don't spam, don't curse and all that. But at the top of it, right, I say, well, all these rules we know as Christians by right, rules are not, the law doesn't save us.
Yeah.
The rules don't save us. It's just, ultimately, it's whether you love your brother or not. They will know we're Christians by our love. And so I think that's in the digital space. I think as Christians, we sometimes tend to want to construct all these guidelines and handrails moving forward. This can or that cannot. But then I think that's missing the point. The question is like, how do we love? How do people feel love? How do we get people to feel love through their screens, through their however it is that they're engaging with the game or through the internet? I think it can come through. Can it replace physical interaction completely? No. But I think it can be a great complement to it if there is enough love. I know, quite cheesy, quite standard answer, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I guess you just don't think of it in those terms in the godless spaces, you know? Yeah, but personally, how do you do it in your GG ministry?
I mean, so again, right, like, how do you do it? It's so a lot of talk about discipleship and living the Christian life right now. There's a lot of talk about, there's a lot of people making this distinction between doing and being. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. So I think the past maybe 50 years, Christians were very interested in a lot of doing. Do missions, do evangelism, do church, do quiet time, do programs, do.
Yeah.
But we've forgotten how to be. So you're supposed to just be salt and light, be loving, be Christ-like. I think that's more of the Bible's language. Just go and be. It's not go and, go and be salt and light. So I think what I just try to do is just, like, as I'm, I have a group, right, that I used to play a lot of Rainbow Six Siege with. And the whole idea is just, how can you, actually it's, okay, I just rewind a bit. Actually, it's quite easy because, again, gaming culture, like I said, is so toxic. You just need to be a decent person to really make a difference. So, one of the things I used to do in the arcades. So in the arcade, so this applies to digital as well. Arcades used to have a bad reputation.
Yeah.
for places where gangsters, paikias hang out and all that, and it's quite justified. Like I witnessed quite a few fights in the arcade back in my day. I'm sorry, to the young people. I'm so sad. I have a daughter and she'll never know what an arcade is. I think
she will lah.
Hopefully,
And next there's still one.
Yeah. There'll be a retro. It's a retro thing. But so what I used to do, so what used to happen in the arcades is when you win, or you would like look at the other guy across and be like, give him the eye, just beat you kind of look. But all I just started to do was, like, when I win or lost, I just went up to the person and say, good game. That's it. And like, people would look at me weird. I'm like, was this guy crazy? But I just kept doing it, and I just say, hey, good game, hey, that. And even when I lost, especially when I lose, I would say, hey, hey, good game, hey, your Ryu is really good. And to them, like, can you imagine, like, for these people who've been in the arcade day in, day out, like, that's the first time they've ever heard someone compliment them when they beat, when they beat them. And so, when it comes to online spaces, it's just in the little things that people pick up from you. It's like I had a pastor once said, a lot of things in life are caught rather than taught. And so it's just how you act, when you lose, when you for you win, do you say like GG easy noobs? Or when you win, you go like, hey, good game, you guys did great. Or when you're part of a team, especially, so when you're part of a team nowadays, many games are team-based. League of Legends, Mobile Legends, first-person shooters, Valorant. And in your team, are you the first guy to start flaming people when things go south? Or are you the one who's like really encouraging and really positive? And, I think also able to see through eyes of faith. Because, okay, for example, one thing I taught one of my guys when we were playing, sometimes the game, as the game progresses, so we used to play a lot of like team-based stuff. And so as the game progresses, sometimes there are just some things that your team does that sets it up for failure. And normally the tendency for people in that situation would be to kind of like give up or just start flaming the team, But I told him, you need to learn how to stay positive. And I think that not just positive thinking, but believe in your team, have faith in your team. And 9 times out of 10, you might still probably lose. But if you keep showing your team that you believe in them, they might actually pull off like a miracle comeback.
Clutch. Huh?
Yeah, clutch, right? And he started doing that. He started being positive no matter what the game situation was like. And that really encouraged the team, and we turned a lot of games around. And so what happened to my friend, I hope, is that he sees that, for Christians, we look beyond what we can just see and what the situation looks like, and always, faith, and always believe that things can turn around, and all that. There's always that hope. And so it's just in all these small things. I don't believe in programs. I mean, I think events and programs are good to bring people together. But if we have all these events and programs, but when it comes time for non-Christians or people who are kind of like far away from church to be actually interacting with Christians, and Christians behave the same way as people outside of church, then no point.
That's what's true.
So it's all about just going into the space, and just like quite simple, just being Christ-like, and that you'll be surprised that there's power in that, I believe.
I think part of the reason for the toxicity of online gaming is that a lot of people go there for catharsis, just go there to vent, just release, and then like all the frustration after work, they literally just bunkai over the game, and just scream. I think that's pretty much the case, right? Yeah, so actually for Christians to go there and exercise self-control can be it'll be quite refreshing on one hand. At the same time, it's it's really so counterculture to the point people are like, what the heck? This is not the point, Yeah, so that's where I think that's where actually Christ is most needed, isn't it? Because it's like it's where people like release the worst of themselves. Yeah, and where we need to exercise self-control and show grace.
Yeah, I think that's one part of it. But I really like. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian, who said, I think as Christians, we get overly focused on behaviors that we're not supposed to do, but we should be more focused on things that we should be doing. So instead of looking at, okay, being Christ-like in the gaming space as, okay, I shouldn't swear, I better not swear, I better not curse, I better not what? How can you bring out, so instead of suppressing the worst of yourself, bring out the best in yourself instead. So instead of looking at it from a self-control point of view, which is important too, but let's think about, how can we be encouraging? How can we bring life? How can we show people what real fun is like? How can we show people what being part of a great team looks like? And there might be occasional cursing and swearing, sure, but that's not the point. Yeah, so the point is, let's just find out how we can be, really great, fun-loving, kick-ass gamers that people just want to be part of your team on. People just love playing with you. So I think that's more of, I think maybe we can just maybe it would be good to just focus a bit more on the positive, the positive sides, rather than seeing how we can suppress our negative tendencies. Because then I think as you become more positive, as you love, as you encourage, as you bring life, which we believe as Christians we should be having, the power of the Holy Spirit, the presence of Christ in us, then the negatives, it will outweigh the negatives, and naturally the negatives will pale in comparison. That's what I believe.
Personally, for you as a gamer, when do you start to realize this? I guess at some point in time you were swept up by the world's culture as well.
Yeah.
Right. So at what point do you discover this truth?
Oh yeah, man. So I used to be a really salty gamer, right?
Oh,
salty
gosh.
means I had a reputation in the arcades for being quite so when I would lose, I would slam the
buttons.
Buttons.
Is that called a norm?
Yeah, it is a norm, but I would really and I would some choice language would come out. So I used to be like that, but it started to change when I went to Korea. So I did my exchange in Korea, and back then I was starting to get serious about my faith as well. And so my mission in Korea was basically to not hang around with the Singaporean exchange students, was to get to know as many Koreans as possible. That's why you're an exchange. And one of the best ways I got to know people was so I went to the arcade to play, because Koreans are really good and they're really on about games, right? So I went there and I just wanted to just make friends through the game, and I just tried it out. I just tried. Street Fighter 4 just came out, so I just tried. After winning, I just went up and I also wanted to practice my Korean So I would say good game. I forgot how to say it in Korean already. Yeah, but I would just say, good game, thanks for the game. And again, right? And then they would look at me weird. But then after a while, this community started to form around me. This foreigner, really, it was, so I went to this arcade.
So you became the pops kid at the arcade because you're polite.
Yes, exactly. It's so weird, right? Yeah, just being polite and being positive and all that. And all of a sudden, there was this community. Well, it helps that, I was competent at the game. But so then there was this community that formed around me. And I did my exchange in Busan, which is in the south. And I had a friend as well in Seoul, in the north, playing Street Fighter. So we got to know each other through forums. And for some reason, because I became the bridge between the north and the south, between Busan and the Seoul fighting Street Fighter communities, and they started to talk and get together and all that. So and one of my friend in Korea, who's not a Christian, he says, yeah, you just do this thing where you're just so positive and nice, and you know, just yeah, you do that, and people feel great hanging around the arcade again. And so I saw the power of just being a decent Christian in that space. It united communities. And that's when I decided, hey, I'm just going to be very deliberate about doing that when I come back to Singapore. And like I said, that's when I saw, hey, you know, it actually works. The gospel works. Like, you know, you be salt and light. Just
loving your enemies.
Loving your enemies. Really, yeah. Loving your enemies. It's because, right, Jesus says, even bad people, even bad people even sinners know how to pray for the people that they like. But what makes you a Christian, what makes you special is if you can love your enemies. Yeah, right? So, yeah, that's just what I did. And people started to, that was so countercultural. We take it for granted in church. But that was so countercultural to so many of the people in the arcade. And so it really transformed, I think, not me, but I believe, you know, the power of the gospel really transformed the culture there. So that's when I saw there's something special there's something powerful with the way Jesus calls us to live. It sends such a strong statement to the world. And I think sometimes for many of us, we spend our whole lives in church, especially for second generation Christians, and we forget how radical the gospel actually really is. Because now I think Christianity is a bit on the defensive. We're known for the people who are bigots, who are anti-LGBT, who are, you know, all the sins of the church past has all come out. And so we tend to be a bit apologetic about our faith these days. But I think if we actually just try and practice our faith, like what Jesus, you know, calls us to do, then I think we will see again we would, I think, hopefully recover a bit of pride in the gospel and in our faith in these spaces. So that's what I saw.
I think also partly, you know, it's immediately gratifying when you get to sneer at someone or you get to curse someone, like and be a sore loser for that moment. But after you leave the arcade, you just feel like crap, you know, because like it got nowhere. It was really just that moment's satisfaction. But then at a point in time, you do that awkward, polite thing of like saying like good game, everyone stares at you. But after that, you can walk away with a clean conscience, right? You can walk away with the peace of God in your heart because you did not just destroy someone in the game and in person, but in a sense you help with some restoration, right? Which is pretty much what the gospel is about. It's like restoring people. I mean, although like no doubt we're just like trying to outdo one another, like in the games, but in real life we are still trying to restore relationships rather than destroying it. You know, yeah. So I think that's the appeal that really just build that community. It's just amusing to me that you build a community around polite arcade gamers. That's quite ridiculous, actually. Yeah. Actually, I want to segue right now into another part of this ministry that you've been doing, which is about trying to redeem the gaming narratives, right? It's not just it's about the gamers on one hand, right? Trying to find their expression of the gospel through gaming. And it's also about in this case, how you find the redemptive narratives within the games that you play. I think you shared with me over our previous meeting about some of such stories. Maybe you can share with us a little bit more, because I think back then you were not prepared, right? Yeah. I hopefully maybe you can share with us like how exactly you redeem these gaming narratives.
Right. So I think on one hand, like you were mentioning to me earlier, that like even the Gospel Coalition website is now talking about like movies and where the gospel is in some like a horror movie or something.
Right, I'll put a plug for that one. Actually, there's an article on it. You can go and read the Gospel Coalition. There's an article where it compared two movies. I think it's Cruella and A Quiet Place 2. A Quiet Place 2 is a horror movie which I don't dare to watch, by the way, because I don't have the guts to watch horror movies. But it's a really cool analysis of the two movies, and like like which narrative presents a more like gospel-centric narrative. Have you read the article yourself?
No.
But it's a really cool article. I think you should go and find it.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why you mentioned that though.
All right. So I mentioned it because I think as Christians we're starting to learn how to see the gospel in pop culture narratives. But gaming, I think, is a bit special because gaming isn't just about the narrative of the game. So I think there's definitely gospel elements in many of the game's narratives. And I think you can find gospel. I think if you really want to try, you can find the gospel in any good story, because I believe that the gospel is a story of God's redemption, of God's rescue. It's a love story. And I think that's why we resonate with good stories. But I'm also a little bit more interested in what makes games special. And what makes games special is that it's a game, it's interactive. And I'm interested in figuring out where the gospel is in that interaction between you and the game. So a little bit philosophical here, but like, for example, like I believe that games try to tell you one thing through the narrative, but they're also trying to teach you things through the gameplay itself. And I think I'm interested in figuring out where the gospel is in that, in that, yeah, like I said, in that interaction with the game. So for example, one of the games I played recently, which I really liked, was Ghost of Tsushima. It's a PS4 game. It's a samurai era game, and it's about. When I was preparing this, I'm trying to figure out a way to talk about all these games without spoiling it. But generally speaking, it's
spoiler alert. I just go for it,
Spoiler alert. No, I'll try not to spoil like the endings, at least. Okay, but spoiler alert. But yeah, so what basically it's a game about this samurai defending the island, the real life island of Tsushima in Japan, against invading Mongolians. And one of the big tensions in the narrative of the game is the tension between keeping tradition and being pragmatic enough to save the island. So immediately, like in the early parts of the game, they realize that the way the Mongolians fight, they fight without the samurai honor, when there's like a duel and then, two people, but rather the Mongolians, they fought dirty. And so this guy, the main hero, he realized that if he wants to beat the Mongolians, he'd also have to fight dirty. That means kind of like be an assassin, fight in the shadows, stuff like that. But his mentor was very much against him doing that. His mentor says, no, you're a samurai. What makes you different from them is you fight with honor, head on, no backstabbing. And throughout the game, what I think is really good is that the game actually, through the gameplay, actually helps you feel that tension. Because it really is easier to clear, for example, a Mongolian camp through stealth and through dirty tricks, through ninjutsu or whatever. And it is harder to just face everybody head on. And so there is that tension. And there's actually consequences in the game that arise from your actions if you use underhanded methods. And at the same time, and so what's great about the game is at the same time it shows like if you don't use these underhanded methods, these Mongolians will pillage and kill everyone in the island, basically. So I think that also translates to tension that we have in church. We've kind of talked about this, between maintaining tradition and looking at new ways of evangelism or new ways of preaching the gospel.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like this comes back to what we've been talking about. And I think that game, as you play it, you really feel that tension. There's so much beauty and in the samurai tradition and in the island of Tsushima that it presents to you. It is very romantic. But the game also tells you that if you keep sticking to the old ways, you're not going to drive the Mongolians out. You have to do you have to get pragmatic as well. So the game doesn't, and what I love about the game is that the game doesn't say this is right or this is wrong. the pragmatic way is right or the traditional way is right. It kind of leaves it open-ended. And what's wonderful as a game is you as a player get to choose. And you get to experience the consequences of your actions. I won't spoil it. The last part of the game, you're given a choice. And basically that choice in the end of the game is a choice between keeping tradition and being pragmatic. And yeah, what I love about the game, games give you this sandbox in which to see, okay, let's be traditional. Oh man, it's really hard. And you will lose, lives can get lost because you're insistent on doing things the old way. And at the same time, when you're being very pragmatic, then you also realize, hey, that it's really dirty. It can get a bit dirty as well. What makes you different from the Mongolian invaders? So it doesn't give you a clean answer. And I think life is like that. And I think faith is like that. It doesn't give you there's never really a clean answer. And I think that's why, you always need to be in touch with the Holy Spirit and all that. And so, yeah, anyway, so this game, through the narrative and the gameplay, I really thought really encapsulated this tension that we as Christians, especially young Christians, face between tradition and moving forward. I like to say, for example, Street Fighter as well, fighting games. I mean, there's no narrative lah. The narrative is there's this international tournament, there's the Shadowloo, there's this organization, whatever. Nobody plays Street Fighter for the story. Everyone plays Street Fighter for the ability to beat someone else up. So where's the gospel in that? Well, for me, right, two things. Through fighting games, I feel like when I play somebody in a fighting game, especially when we're on the same level, I feel a very deep connection to that person. I'm not sure, if you watch The Matrix, there's this character called Seraph who says, Angel, right? Who says, when he meets Neo, the hero, the first thing he does is he fights Neo. And then Neo asks, why do you fight me? He says, you never truly know someone until you fight them. I remember this. Yeah. So I remember that. That was in Matrix 2. And I think it's so true. So, the friends that I played a lot of fighting games with, right? It's amazing. I know their character inside out based on the tendencies that they have in game. So, for example, on a very simplistic level, this guy, he's very known for his defense. And he picks characters that are just super defensive. And in real life, he's a quiet, conservative guy, reserved guy. It's true.
He's not the first strike kind of
yes,
person.
And then I have another friend. He got like Angkong, all very extroverted, very bright color clothes, and all the characters. The way he plays the game, it's also very flashy, and it comes through when there's that tension and conflict. Because I think that's also kind of what we believe in, right? When we're pressed, where the Bible kind of like does say that we, God tests us, God gives us trials, God gives us hardship because He's refining us, right? Like this analogy that we like to use in church, right? It's like silver, right? You burn to refine silver. It goes through high heat. All the impurities are melted away. And I think when I play Street Fighter, sometimes it feels that way. When in that high pressure moment and environment, your impurities get stripped away, and it comes, and your true character really shows in how you express yourself in this fighting game. It's, and to me, that is, I think that's biblical. Like God, look at Jacob, who wrestled with God. Look at all the people in the Bible who have a deep relationship with God. I think all of them wrestled with God. And they all knew God a little bit deeper after wrestling. When you read the Psalms, David wrestles with God so much in his heart. And I think because, as you wrestle with God, as you go deep, and it's when you go gritty with Him, that's when you truly know Him. And I think the Bible, so for me, when I play Street Fighter, I that's one of the truths I think that I learned from playing that game. And I also learned a lot about myself, because when under pressure, you revert to habits that you revert to habits. So for example, I'm generally an impatient guy. I will strike first. And so people know that. People know if you want to beat me, let me strike first and counter my strike. And then, I'll get very frustrated halfway through the game and I'll make mistakes. And so to get better in the game, I had to learn to control. So that self-control, I had to learn how to be more patient. And yeah, I learned these things about myself through a very high pressure conflict environment. And I think in the Bible, yeah, again, we see God, he puts, like I like to say, right, you look at all the good guys in the Bible, all of them have their desert moment.
But they're put through
high pressure. Daniel, literally the fire. Moses, the desert. The Israelites, the desert. Paul, Jesus, the desert, right? But then all the good guys, all the bad guys, all the people that kind of didn't finish well, never really went through a desert period. Saul, King Saul, generally, yeah, I mean, like who else? King Saul, Samson, right? They didn't have a kind of like a desert, a struggling period with themselves or with God. Esau, and yeah, therefore I don't think they really knew themselves and they really knew God. So anyway, so for me, I think, yeah, playing a lot of Street Fighter has been, through the gameplay, has been very revealing to me. I mean, that's how I connected to my faith.
Are there other like games which really connected like with like some of the biblical narratives which
Again, so I think what makes a good story is, so what makes the gospel a good story? The gospel is a good story because it's a drama in which we face an insurmountable distance to reach someone that we love, right? God overcomes, the main character is God, not us. The main character is God. God crosses an insurmountable gap by sacrificing himself so that we could be connected with him again. And that is, if you look at almost any movie that's really good, I mean, there's always the elements of that, right? That struggle, that overcoming. So I think in almost any video game or movie, you can find that . But of course, to answer your question more specifically, I mean, recently I wrote on my blog, I played Jedi Fallen Order. And it's about a lone Jedi who survived Order 66, which is when the Empire culled all the Jedi, and he found himself alone, and he found himself quite purposeless. Wandering and all that, and wondering. Yeah. So, and it's about him. So the game is about kind of him recovering his purpose as a Jedi, and that resonated a lot with me because, I left ministry. And so for a time, and especially 2020, right, I felt so alone. And, I think many of us are wondering, like, what's our purpose, right? And if you look at the Bible, one of the, I drew the analogy of this whole loneliness and struggle for purpose with Elijah, who fled after he defeated the prophets at Mount Carmel, the prophets of Baal and Mount Carmel. He fled. He was persecuted by Jezebel and King Ahab, and then he fled. And his complaint to God was, I feel so alone. I feel so alone. And what's the point in all this? Because he just saw, people just saw God fire from the sky, and yet Jezebel was in power, and the people in power still drove him out of the country. But what was God's reply? God's reply to him was, I have set aside 7,000 people who have not bended the knee. And so in this game, Jedi Fallen Order, he gets so much encouragement from from realizing that, so he comes into possession of this codex, which is the directory of all the other Padawans in this galaxy.
That are still existing.
Oh. So he found a revitalization of his purpose by realizing, hey, the Jedi Order isn't completely dead yet. There's people around him.
So in a sense, there's still a remnant.
There's still a remnant, exactly, right? The Bible talks so much about a remnant, yeah. And yeah, there's still this remnant, and that really encouraged him a lot. and that also helped him to reconnect with the Force. And so there's so much, yeah, right. And it is so there's so much. I mean, it's been talked to death already, like how faith and Star Wars. But yeah, that's this one. That's another thing that that really resonated with me. I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter World, like I said, and Monster Hunter World is a very interesting. There's a big part of the narrative is about mankind's interaction with nature. And how we treat animals and man's effect on the environment. It's very interesting, which speaks to me, of course, about, nowadays, like we talk about creation care. We talk about Adam's original mandate to subdue the earth and to, so for me, I felt really connected with that again as I played the game. And one of the things it's in my next video. Monster Hunter is a game in which you hunt a monster, you skin the monster so that you can wear its armor and get new loot and get a sword, or make its hide into a sword or whatever. And it's very interesting. The first death recorded in the Bible is God skinning an animal and putting the skin on, creating a fur coat, giving it to Adam and Eve. So I don't know. It just feels like it just feels. Anyways, so what I get when I play the game is even though I'm killing these monsters and using them as fur coats, I feel very connected to them because I actually had to hunt them myself, and I think the Bible. To me, when I look at the Bible is very messy that way. And I think, the Bible calls us to, I think also, without giving too much of the video away, I think the Bible also calls us to, it does sanction the hunting of animals and the consumption of animals, but there's always this respect that we're all called as Christians to have of the earth, to have of creation. I was always very puzzled as to why, if you go and read the book of Jonah, at the end of the day, the last part of the book of Jonah is God saying, don't I care for Nineveh with how many people, but also a lot of cattle, or also a lot of livestock. It ends with that, and God cares about the livestock as well. Anyway, so as I play Monster Hunter, I do feel that sense of connection, like with the things that I consume, through the gameplay, and I think through the narrative as well. Without trying to spoil too much.
So the video will be available when? Sorry.
I'm coming up with the video hopefully in a few more weeks.
But then this interview would come out much later, so don't worry.
Much later, yeah. Okay, cool. So it might probably be out already.
Yeah.
Anyways, let me take a look at. Would you wanna, I think I prepared a couple of stuff. One of the games I played recently is Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. It's by the same guy that made Dark Souls. It's a very hard game. Like notoriously, like Dark Souls and Sekiro, it's made by From Software. And these games are notoriously hard. And in this game, when you die, you get resurrected. And what makes the game very hard is, like, for example, you earn like XP, right? As you kill monsters or you kill bad guys. But if you die, you lose everything.
Huh? So you don't get to respawn with the same.
You can, if you can manage to fight your way back to the point at which you died, you can recover your XP.
Oh.
But if you don't, you lose everything. And people have been known to be very, very, very frustrated with this game because it's really hardcore. But as I played Sekiro, I noticed that there's lots of, and it's set in ancient Japan again, and there's lots of Buddhist themes. And at the end of the day, without spoiling the game alludes a lot to the cyclical nature of life, which is a very Buddhist, reincarnation, the recreation of the world and all that. So it's that actually led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole in researching Buddhism. And I found out that, we actually have a lot in common. So like I said, I don't want to take, we're definitely different, but I don't, but at the same time, this idea that the world is just broken and necessitates recreation has parallels in the Bible. Of course, in Buddhism, it's perpetual, but for the Bible, there is going to be an end. But in the game, Sekiro, the narrative, basically, it starts off, so without spoiling too much, you end up where you started. and in the gameplay itself, you keep dying and respawning and dying and respawning and dying and respawning, and can get very frustrated because you don't earn XP. And so the game forces you to actually enjoy the game regardless of your progress. Basically nowadays, right, like a lot of games, no matter what, when you play a game, even as long as you spend time in the game, you get rewarded with like XP or gold or whatever, right? Even if you're bad at the game, even if you lose. But for this game, it doesn't. It punishes you really, really hard. So you have to learn how to be comfortable in all of that death and rebirth and just enjoy and love the game for the sake of it. And for me, that I think is also quite a Christian way to live life. I think Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes, has a lot of allusions, has lots of parallels to Buddhism, because the writer of Ecclesiastes says, right, the sun goes up, the sun goes down. And it's like the world just keeps spinning over and over again, and bad stuff keep happening, and sometimes it feels pointless. Because you can try so hard to earn money, but at the end of the day, your money can go to someone else. You can try to be a good person, but at the end of the day, everybody dies. So there's this kind of nihilism. But at the end of the day, the writer of Ecclesiastes says, what's good? What's good is to be able to enjoy the work of your hands, to be able to eat and drink, to be able to enjoy the present. And then it's only when you are able to enjoy the present and letting go of your expectations of the future, and which is a gift that God has given you, because the future is not in your hands, it's in God's hands. And so when I play Sekiro, I have to seriously get into that mindset. And the story, I think, also kind of alludes to that as well. You have to the reward is in the pudding. Like, the reward is not that you finished the game. The reward is that you played the game. The reward is not that you advanced, or that you beat the game, you beat the boss or whatever. The reward is that you got good, or like you played the game, you experienced the game. And I think that's really good game design. And that's why it resonated a lot with me. And the story is there as well.
And it's emphasized in the ending of the game where you end where you started, right?
So
it's like, in a sense, like no quote unquote achievement, like you completed it and that's it.
Yeah, at the end of the game, literally shot for shot, you end up where you begin, almost where you begin.
Wow. Okay.
And as a very clear allusion to kind of like the futility of work and life, which echoes the frustrations of the writer of Ecclesiastes. Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, so in all of these gaming narratives, they appeal because they reveal certain truths. It's like a general revelation, right, in which everyone gets. Which are regardless of the narrative, like whether it's a Star Wars game, whether it's like Monster Hunter, or like or this game,
Ghost of Tsushima, Sekiro.
Yeah, so in a sense, these games appeal to people and people get it. The reason they are so immersed in it is because they relate to the truth that's embodied. And if you're able to extract these truths and say, hey, this is true because this is the way God designed us, or this is like how it's related to scripture, and then reveal a deeper divine revelation beneath the general revelation, then perhaps the truths that people appreciate in games can lead people on to appreciate the deeper spiritual, divine truths of the Bible. Yeah, and that's something really extraordinary. I mean, if we find that in films, right? Like how, even the Gospel Coalition would have a arts and culture column that actually deals with this. Perhaps we need to also think of how games, how we can redeem the narrative of games, to reveal some of these general revelation, and then from there lead people on towards biblical divine revelation, right? I think you are in this pioneering stage right now, and actually it's quite tough, I believe, right? Trying to pioneer something which is novel. Not many churches accept this idea of a gaming ministry. I think there are ministries that try to pull people out of addiction, and that's great. But the whole concept of redeeming the gaming space is still quite novel. Now, what's your experience in pioneering so far, actually?
My experience has been really interesting. A lot of pastors have told me, like, hey, this is really good. We really need something like this.
Really?
Yes.
They told you?
It's the pastors who are actually very okay, but it is actually the general congregations that are a little bit more defensive, like the parents or even some younger people as well. They're the ones that are like,
younger people.
Like, I've seen
me.
20s, 30s, who are also, a little bit concerned, is this going to increase addiction and all that? So so very surprising. The pastors have been very supportive, because I think they see the need, especially some of the younger ones, but I've spoken to some older pastors as well. They're actually very supportive.
Wow.
But I think generally with some of the people in the congregation, some of the, especially parents, and understandably, they're a little bit more concerned.
So how's the journey like?
How's the journey like? Oh man, the journey's been pretty weird because of COVID. So a lot of my interaction has been either one-on-one or online. So it's just trying to connect as much with the pastors as possible, trying to connect with leaders as much as possible right now. But the biggest problem right now is, like I said, is COVID. So churches are all struggling to figure out how to do church in a digital space, which I feel, for example, this ministry is perfect for this current,
Yes, agree.
because it's digital and all that.
And people have been doing it without COVID or even with COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to just perpetuate, right? Because it's just a lifestyle that people just like go into gaming. It's a normal thing nowadays.
Yes.
Like you hardly find a kid that's not in some form of game.
Yeah. So I mean, for example, like a lot of, so you can tell. So for some churches, right, the way they approach COVID, right, to them, I mean, how they approach COVID kind of also aligns with how they approach my ministry. For example, for some churches that have shifted to like online sermons or a little bit more decentralized church because of COVID, when they, some of these churches, they say, we can't wait to get back to normal. And so you can tell to them, this is not normal. Everyone gathering together is normal. Those churches, to them, gaming ministry will always be kind of like a peripheral thing. But for churches that see that, hey, the new normal is this decentralized church, or online gatherings are as important as offline gatherings and all that. These churches are generally more receptive to this, and in fact actually have started their own Discord servers actually. So it's been quite surprising that I've so many churches I've talked to, actually they say, hey, we actually had a guy who started out Discord server. Our young people are actually on this Discord server already. So maybe I'm starting to see my role more as like some guy who connects everything together. Maybe GG can be a place where It's a common platform for all the churches, but there are many individual churches that are actually, they actually have something like this. And what's really encouraging is that most of it is organic. I mean, it's not started by a pastor or whatever. It's just, there's just enough people gaming, so they start their own Discord server and all that kind of thing. So that also speaks to how ubiquitous gaming is now.
Yeah. Maybe one day your role will be to create some inter-church eSports competition.
Yeah.
Is that a dream? Is that the dream?
No, I mean that's in the pipeline for sure.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they just make us do a spoiler right there.
No. I mean, yeah. One of the things. So right now, I'm just deciding which game to do.
What else? What else is in the pipeline?
I mean, so generally when it comes to events, I mean that's one thing. Like that's my DNA. I used to host Street Fighter tournaments. I used to run Street Fighter tournaments, international tournaments. I would shoutcast. I would, all that.
You do that?
We would do that, yeah. And we used to stream it even before Twitch.
Huh?
So before Twitch was a thing, it was called Justin TV.
All right.
And we streamed on Justin TV. We recorded the matches on YouTube. Last time, so to record it from an arcade cabinet, so we actually had a guy with a camcorder above.
He did that.
Yeah, he did that. And then when we would take the footage, we would upload it. So that was in 2009, way back. And so so that's my DNA. I would love to do this for the church. In fact, so so that's in the pipeline. And I'm also part of Gigi's launch. So I don't know when this is going to come out. But I'm launching this ongoing series called Pastors Play. So it's getting a bunch of pastors and getting them to play games. And I want.
How is it going?
So I've got a few pastors on board, and the first thing that we'll be doing is getting a bunch of pastors and lay people to play Among Us. So it's
fairly easy.
That's fairly okay. But backstabbing and deception and deceit and all that kind of stuff. And I love to see how pastors do it.
It's quite hilarious, I think.
I'd love to see it. Yeah, and I'd love to get them to play more other stuff also lah.
Yeah.
My inspiration for this came from two sources. Like have you heard of the Catholic Church in Singapore actually did this? So I don't know if this is kosher on video, but the Catholic Church in Singapore actually, and they copied, I forgot which church overseas, but they actually started this initiative called Theology on Tap, where they actually opened up a bar in Sentosa, like a pop-up bar, to get people to just come in and have a beer with priests. And then, so in that very non-threatening environment, people felt very comfortable and felt very open and felt very safe to just ask the priest tough questions about faith, in which these people would never step into a church, but they would step into a bar. And this Theology on Tap thing it's a movement that's around the world actually. And so for me, it's kind of like, hopefully this Pastors Play can be a
Theology on console.
On console or something, right? Or Theology on Twitch.
Yeah.
Where so in the middle of the games, the people are tuning in, they can ask questions, and people who would never have stepped inside a church, but maybe they play this game, and since the pastors are playing, can ask them some stuff and ask them some questions. So so these are the two big things. So I'm hoping to do as many interchurch events as possible, competitions as possible, and there's going to be this Pastors Play series that I'll be launching as well.
Whew. Wow. Okay. Right. When will you be launching? Sorry.
I'm trying to get everybody available end of this month.
Oh.
So it'll be launching.
Now we're filming in July, so end of July. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So how can people get on board like what you're doing?
So first you can pop into our website, www.godadgames.com. Can I do this? Like, are we cool enough? Am I cool enough to do this? And it pops up. Yeah. It's like, go here. Click the link here. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, he nods his head. It's fine. Yeah, it can be done.
And so through the website, there's a link to our Twitch, which will be streaming this Pastors Play event, and link to the YouTube channel where I talk more about when I try and bridge theology with the game, narratives and gameplay in different games, and also a link to the Discord server. So especially, the Discord server right now is, when this goes live, it should be live as well. So please hop into the Discord server. Just come in. There's going to be channels in which we can discuss God and gaming. There's going to be channels in which we can just talk about games and talk about healthy gaming as well. Maybe even that study group thing channel
On Discord, I
on
think it's a
Discord.
popular thing on Discord, right?
Yeah. And there's also going to be, there are actually sections for different people playing different who are on different platforms like Switch, PlayStation, PC, so that we can actually find, for example, the gaming jargon is LFG la, looking for group, LFM, looking for men. So if we're looking for people, looking for members. So if you, for example, if you've got if 3 of you are playing Dota, you need 2 more people. Hopefully there's enough people on the channel, on the server. You hop onto the channel, we need 2 more people, and get a chance to play, get to know people from other churches. Should be interesting. Yeah, I'm interested to see how it turns out.
Yeah, also very curious. My goodness. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's a lot of plans and a lot of leaks from God and Games, right? Okay, so I think I've come to the end of the interview. Right now, I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes. What's one takeaway, like we want young Christians to take from this interview, right? When you are ready, you can just look in this camera, and then you can just see.
So thanks for having me. And I just want to say, if anything, God is interested in every part of our lives, even the times when we game. I think He's there with us. He loves to see us enjoy ourselves, loves to see us have fun. And so my encouragement is just to allow God's presence to be with us, even as we do something as so-called non-Christian as gaming. And let's see where it goes from there.